Okay, here's my first question for today. Raise your hand if you, since the start of school, have gotten a cold. If you have gotten 2 colds, you may raise both hands. If you were sick and then healed and then sick again. Yes, it's cold season. You can put your hands down. It's cold season. How do we get a cold? We catch it from each other, right? I heard Libby say it. We catch it from each other. It's just like that with the life of faith. We don't get the life of faith through learning or through instruction. We learn about the faith that way. But we catch the faith from each other. Some people like to say, faith isn't taught, it's caught. You ever heard that before? Faith isn't taught, it's caught. This does not mean that you don't have to go to Sunday school. It does not mean that you don't have to get confirmed. It does not mean that you don't have to go to Bible study. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means that those things are a means to an end. Those learning devices, those times of instruction, those coming to understand about Christianity are all meant to serve the gift of what the apostles ask Jesus for in today's gospel. Increase our faith. Increase our faith. Now, I've been a priest for about 12 or 13 years, and nobody really has come to me saying, I would like to increase the amount of information I know about 3rd century heretics. Could you please help me with that? But gosh, not a month goes by that somebody doesn't come to me saying, how can I have more faith? How can my life have more faith in it? They're asking for how our lives can become more embodied with the love of Jesus. How we can live lives that are more full of the confidence and hope that comes from knowing God. Not just knowing about God, but experiencing the presence of God in our lives and in our community. And people usually ask to have their faith increased. Either they ask the priest or they ask God directly when things are tough, when things are hard, when we need that confidence to keep going, when we need that daily reminder of our worthiness to God, of the meaning that comes from living a life that is infused with the self-giving, generous love of God. And that's funny because the apostles asked Jesus how to do this in the gospel, and they ask it very directly and very clearly. It only takes them 3 words to ask the question, increase our faith. And what answer does Jesus give? He tells them these 2 weird parables that, I'm not kidding, last night, 15 of us sat in that chapel for an hour trying to figure out what the answers meant. What was Jesus trying to say about how we increase our faith? And 4 priests and 12 committed lay people had a really hard time getting our head around that. I'm still not sure I know what the answer is, but I do know what the question is. Increase our faith. How do we do it? I turn for more clear instruction to the letter to Timothy, the 2nd letter to Timothy that Becky read to us this morning. Becky's from South Yarmouth, one of our visiting parishes. What does Paul say to Timothy in that letter? He says, I've heard of your faith. How did Timothy get that faith? Anyone remember? How did Timothy get the faith? Who did he get it from, Carol? He got it from Lois and Eunice, his mother and his grandmother. That's how he caught the faith. Because Timothy lived in close proximity with Eunice and with Lois. They may have given him a cold from time to time. They also gave him their faith. I think if you've been a Christian for a while, if you've lived the life of faith for a while, you have some Eunices and Loises in your life. They may not be your mother and your grandmother. They may be a special friend. They may be some kind of companion that you have gotten to know through the life of a church. They may be a teacher you had at one point. But all of us who have lived the life of faith for a while probably have some kind of Eunice or some kind of Lois in our lives. And it's from them that we begin to catch the life of faith. But what is the life of faith that we are catching? I mean, Jesus' answer is pretty incomprehensible to our modern ear. Though if you went back and you did the exegesis and spent an hour on it, you could probably make a little headway. But the Episcopal Church has, over the last year or two, come up with a slightly more coherent and easier to understand quickly way of describing what is the life of faith to which we are called. What is the life of faith that the Eunices and the Loises of our lives have given us? And we call it the way of love. We call it the way of love because love was central to Jesus' ministry on earth. Not happy, fluffy, saccharine, Hallmark, I love you, it's Valentine's Day, but really I'm kind of sad inside. It's not that kind of love. No. The kind of love that is the way of love is the love that Jesus offers each one of us. A love that is joyful at times, but costly at other times. A love that is rooted in self-giving and generosity. The way of love. If you look on the front of your leaflet, you'll see an articulation of 7 words that talk about what it is to live the life of faith according to the way of love. Worship, pray, learn, turn, go, bless, and rest. Worship, pray, learn, turn, go, bless, rest. You could make a little rap out of it if you wanted to. Maybe there'll be a youth choir anthem with those words in the future. They're all verbs. They're all actions. And I'm not going to go through and describe each one. We'll probably, as a community, have opportunities to do that in the months ahead. Because this paradigm of living the way of love, the way that Jesus teaches us in the Gospels, the way that the Eunices and the Loises of our lives have modeled for us so faithfully, that way is something that we'll be unpacking and exploring together for a long time. But they're all verbs. Because sometimes we get too stuck on the feelings of faith. Sometimes we worry our faith is not enough because of how it feels. We worry that somehow we're not experiencing the love of God correctly, or we're not steeped in God's grace as much as we would like to feel it. And it's good to feel the love of God. It's great to feel the grace and the blessings of the Holy Spirit in our hearts. But you know what? We don't feel it every single day. It doesn't make it untrue. So these verbs help us to have practices that we can do to know that we're living the life of faith, the faith that has been gifted to us, especially in those dry times when we just don't feel it. We can worship. We can pray. We can learn. We can turn. We can bless. We can go. And most of all, we can rest. These 7 actions are the way of love into which Christ invites all of us, and into which, in just a moment, we will be baptizing Meredith Joy Shannon, who is talking back and giving sermon feedback before she's even baptized. I love it. When I met with Bethany and Patrick, well, I didn't meet with Patrick, he was in Europe. When I met with Bethany 2 weeks ago, and we were preparing for today's baptism, we were talking about what baptism is for. Baptism in the Episcopal tradition is focused on really one main thing: claiming our own belovedness. Every single person is beloved by God, whether baptized or not. Baptism is the way that a Christian claims that sense of God's belovedness for them. And it's something that a baptized person can go back to over and over again in your life as you live the way of love. On those days when you don't feel it in your heart, remember that as a baptized person, you have claimed God's belovedness in your life. And that is something that no one can take away from you. That's why we only baptize once. You can't get rebaptized. You can't reclaim God's belovedness for yourself again. You do it once, and it's with you forever. Baptized into God's belovedness so that we can live the way of love in the world. So today is a day of great joy. It's a day of great hope. It's a day of great promise. It's a day when we remember the Eunices and the Loises of our lives. Meredith's really lucky. She's named after her two grandmothers. She has many Eunices and Loises in her family, and she has many Eunices and Loises here in this room who will help her be raised to know her belovedness, to really know it, and then to use that to live the way of love in the world. And whatever brought you to church this morning, whatever sorrow or struggle or challenge or joy or celebration brought you to church today, you also are living the way of love on this day and every day. Amen.